Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and today we are talking about some 4Ks from Scream Factory. We're talking about cats and dogs. Cat people and dog soldiers. So let's start with cat people, okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to say right out of the gate is that if you bought the previous Cat People special edition, which is a really nice special edition, actually, I have it right here, of Cat People from Scream Factory, the collector's edition, you are not really getting any new extra features on this disc. What you are getting is a brand new 4K scan from the original camera negative, and it looks really good, I have to say. I didn't do an exact side-by-side with the original transfer, but this 4K scan looks quite nice. John Bailey's cinematography, the production design by Fernando Scarfiati, I think. Beautiful stuff. A lot of great color, stuff that, makes a 4K scan worthwhile, I think. A 4K disc worthwhile. I am definitely a fan of this version of Cat People. This is a remake, sort of the 40s Val Lewton Cat People, originally directed by Jacques Tourneur, which has come out on Criterion. I think I have that up there somewhere. But Paul Schrader's version comes post his success with American Gigolo. It's almost right on the heels of that, sort of. And Schrader has talked about how he was offered the script and he liked the idea at the time of directing something that he didn't write. And it ends up becoming, in his words, one of his most personal films. It totally goes the opposite direction of what he had originally thought it would be. It's originally offered to him as part of, I guess, something Universal was doing at the time where they were remaking horror properties from the 40s and 50s that they owned. The other high-profile one that I can think of is, of course, John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. And for whatever stupid reason, I'm sure a lot of you put this together, but I didn't ever put this together, that these two films coming out in the same year and both being based on, RKO properties. I just never tied it together for whatever reason. And I love that idea. And I like both films. And it occurred to me that as disparate as they are, it might be an interesting double bill to watch The Thing and Cat People. I'm trying to think which you would watch first. I think Cat People would be the B picture. I think that would work the best. But anyway, I hadn't made that connection for some silly reason, and any connection to The Thing gets points for any movie that I can connect it to. So another connection between the two, by the way, is that Albert Whitlock, the great special effects gentleman, matte painter extraordinaire, this is a film he worked on as well as The Thing, and I think Cat People might have been after The Thing, and so it's one of his last projects before he retires. And some of his matte paintings in this film are really, really great, especially towards the beginning of the film, establishing some exotic locales and stuff. So this is what Schrader calls a beauty film, and he really, especially there's an archival interview with him on here. He really, and even to this day, he seems to bristle at the idea that it's a remake because, and he's not wrong, it is a loose remake of sorts in terms of there are two characters with the same names, but in this case they're brother and sister, sort of, played by Malcolm McDowell and Nastasia Kinski. They turn into cats when aroused. That is, the people that turn into cats is about the main part of it that connects the two films, the original Cat People and this one. This film is set in New Orleans. The original, I believe, was set in New York. And this film really soaks in its New Orleans location. The other thing that's similar about them, they both have zoo elements and locations that are involved. And some of the zoo stuff, there are some similarities in some of the cages, I guess, but ultimately, really, again, it's not a remake in the sense that it's doing a lot of the same things as the original. So this one is much more sexual. Obviously, it can be way more sexual than a film from the early 40s during the production code, but Schrader really leans into that, and I think it's not necessarily a thing that his attraction to Nastassja Kinski, and I believe they had some kind of affair during the production. I'm not sure. I know he was really drawn to her. I'm sure that affects the sexual nature of the film, which was already quite that way. But just in terms of the way that they shoot her, and just in general, I think that there's probably a lot of sex on his mind when he's making this movie. So it really seeps into the film. And I think it's an interesting, 80s monster movie, sort of. And it's very dreamlike. It's, it has a really great cast. Obviously, I mentioned Malcolm McDowell and Nastassja Kinski. John Hurd plays a zookeeper that gets involved with Kinski. Annette O'Toole also works at the zoo. Ed Begley Jr. works at the zoo. Scott Paulin is a reporter, I think. John Larroquette in an early performance. There's a lot of recognizable faces here. And so that adds to it for me. There's obviously a great David Bowie track, Putting Out the Fire with Gasoline, that would later be used in Inglourious Bastards. It's sort of the theme to this film. So there's good music. And then the score is also done by Giorgio Moroder, who a great composer from this period that I like. Schrader had worked with him on American Gigolo as well. I really love his use of synthesizer type music. He's really unique in that way, and I really dig his stuff. So there's a lot to dig about this movie. I also noticed, this is just a silly aside, but there's a scene in this movie that I watched this time where I think Nastassja Kinski's character is watching TV at breakfast, and Top Cat is on, the cartoon Top Cat is on TV, and I thought that was a funny joke. Anyway, so I think it's a fascinating movie, and it goes to some dark places, and I don't really want to get into the plot per se, because like I said, it's a very dreamy movie about this brother and sister duo who have been estranged and who don't really know each other, nor they really, or at least she doesn't fully understand the cat people nature of herself, and the complications that get involved with John Hurd and Malcolm McDowell. It's this interesting triangle sort of thing. But, fascinating production design. One of the things that Schrader talks about is how much influence the production designer Fernando Scarfiati had on the film. Like, he was a visual consultant / production designer, had so much control that he could almost call cut during a scene. Not quite that much, but that he could be on the set with Schrader whispering in his ear, and was allowed a great deal of freedom in designing his sets. Outside of having to show the original designs, there are at least a few sets that he built without showing anybody anything until they were done. Like, that was one of his caveats, is I will do this, but you have to approve the drawings and then let me, make the sets. And then there were specific points that in designing the sets that he actually was like, this is where you should shoot this establishing shot. The set is designed for this. The set is designed for this dinner table shot. And so he's got a lot of creative control, and Schrader really credits him a lot in the commentary for his contributions to the film, along with John Bailey, the cinematographer. So it's fascinating on that level to have a film ruled by production design, and I dig that. Not every movie is like that, and when they are, they kind of tend to stand out. So again, this doesn't have any new features. And the other thing that's a little bit Oh, no. Okay. So we have this kind of reversible artwork, right? But what we don't have, it's a little bit of a bummer, is that we don't get to keep the old redesigned cover art, which I like. It's not the end of the world to lose it, but I kind of would have liked to have the option to have it. So that's no longer with us on this version. But so there's a lot of features here. I'm going to just go through them briefly for you. The Schrader commentary, again, this, I don't know if this comes from the DVD or from the Blu-ray, but it's a good track. I like Schrader commentaries in general, but he does, again, go into the production design, cinematography, talking about New Orleans as a location, the different cats that they used, talks about the death of one of the cats, that when he crashes his head into some bars on a window in a specific scene, he split his skull open and then it had to be put down. Really sad, actually, to hear some of those animal stories. I kind of wish I didn't, but interesting to have him denote, like, okay, that's a mountain lion dyed black, that's a leopard, that's this, that's that. So he's doing that as he's doing the commentary. He talks about different things that inspired him, the city of New Orleans, Nastasia Kinski, some other stuff. It's a good track all the way through. So I enjoyed the track, and it was good to... That is the only special feature on the 4K, because we get the 4K and the Blu-ray, and most of the features are going to be on the Blu-ray. And it's about 90 minutes of bonus content, so it's a decent amount of stuff. Ultimately, we have a lot of interviews with Paul Schrader again, and with a lot of the principal cast, which were, I think, acquired during the production of this collector's edition. So you have interviews with Paul Schrader, Nastasia Kinski, Annette O'Toole, John Hurd, Malcolm McDowell, Lynn Lowry, Giorgio Moroder, and then some other stuff. So the Paul Schrader is about 9 minutes and 13 seconds. A short interview. He's covering some new stuff, some stuff he does in the commentary. There's definitely some overlap in the there's multiple Paul Schrader interviews here. But I feel like there's some new stuff in almost all of them. Interview with Nastasia Kinski is very short, about 6 minutes, talking about being approached by Schrader to do the movie, etc. Annette O'Toole, 8:25. John Hurd, 6:12. Malcolm McDowell, 7:34. These are all interviews where they talk about what they were doing at the time and how they became involved with the film and their recollections of working on the film with specific actors. I think John Hurd is maybe the most frank in his interview. It seems to give the least of a care about, saying anything out of line. He's got a lot of... He's just very frank, and I like that about it. Annette O'Toole is great too. Malcolm McDowell, always a fun interview. So those are fun. Lynn Lowry is a very specific interview because she's got a smaller part in the film. It's about a 6-minute interview, but she's involved in a scene where a prostitute is invited to a room and there is a leopard in the room. And so she's talking about getting cast and dealing with that specific scene. So it's a bit more focused in terms of her role. Giorgio Moroder talking about how he became involved and the score and such. And then we have some older interviews. There's a 2000 interview that's about 25 and a half minutes. Schrader in his apartment in New York. Some overlap with the commentary, but again, there's some new stuff in there, some different takes on similar ideas, but a good interview. There's an archival on-set video, which is him actually on set. He's in the zoo set. It's about 10 minutes and 21 seconds. He's kind of grumpy. You can tell he maybe doesn't want to do this interview. He's dodging the questions. Like the first question is, what's the movie about? And he's like, I don't really want to answer what the movie's about, blah, blah, blah. So you can tell he's a little grumpy. Interesting to see him at this time. He's definitely taking himself incredibly seriously, and there's something almost amusing about that because he seems more laid back. He still takes himself seriously, but in later interviews, but he seems more laid back now than he was then, because I think he's really in a relative prime of his career in terms of directing, coming off American Gigolo, making this big Universal movie, and you can kind of feel it in the way that he gives the interview. So that's amusing. And then there is filmmaker Robert Wise on Val Lewton, the producer of the original Cat People. This is about a 3.5-minute interview with Robert Wise, who, again, worked with Val Lewton and directed some of those movies. And this is interviewed by Laurent Bouzereau. And then there's a special makeup effects by Tom Berman featurette. These three are older and like 4x3, maybe from a DVD, I don't know. That's about 11 minutes and 14 seconds. So a lot of extra stuff, just not a lot of new stuff. But like I said, this transfer is pretty great. If this was a movie you really like, then it's worth it, I think, to do the upgrade for this 4K. It's really, really a good-looking movie, and the transfer looks lovely. Now, moving on to Dog Soldiers from 2002. I'll start by, again, addressing this is another one that's come out from Scream Factory previously. In this case, we do have some new features. Now, what's interesting about this one is that this 4K is coming out in sort of in conjunction with / at the same time as a 4K from Second Sight in the UK. And I haven't had a chance to look if they've imported all the Scream Factory features, but it looks like Scream Factory has imported some of their features, and those are new to this release. The new 4K restoration from the original camera negative is by Second Sight Films, so it should be the same scan if you're buying that disc or this disc. And I will say this does look very good, the best I've ever seen this movie look, for sure. So this is an approved by director Neil Marshall and DP Sam McCurdy transfer, again, from the original camera negative. So really nice looking disc. And this film is, you know, it's a really remarkable debut film. It really announces Neil Marshall as a horror guy that will obviously go on to do a lot of stuff in the world of horror. He follows this up with some great stuff in the things like, of course I'm blanking because I'm on the spot, but The Descent, of course, is the one I was thinking of. A really great second film, a movie that I think is really fantastic. Anyway, and he goes on to do a lot of other stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's a very enjoyable debut because it is from a guy who loves movies and who is very much influenced by movies, quoting movies throughout. In fact, his commentary on this disc is a lot of it is him pointing out little references to other movies. But the movie itself feels to me a bit like bits of Southern Comfort and Predator with werewolves in the mix. So you have like American Werewolf in London and Wolfen-style POV stuff. The basic plot is that a squad of British soldiers on a training exercise in the lonesome Scottish wilderness find a wounded Special Forces captain and the remains of his team, and they encounter a zoologist. It turns out that werewolves are active in the region, and they have to prepare for basically what becomes a siege movie, which I think is the really interesting part about this one, is it starts as werewolves attacking in the forest and then becomes a movie, akin to siege movies like Assault on Precinct 13, Rio Bravo. Zulu is definitely called out as a big influence on this. But it's a cabin/farmhouse in the woods, so you have this Evil Dead-ish Sam Raimi kind of energy happening. And, there's a nice... So you have soldiers fighting werewolves, which is interesting in and of itself. But then you have the farmhouse where they can then, sort of dig in and get creative with the weapons. Axes, there's a sword, there's all kinds of things that they find at the farmhouse they can use to fight the werewolves. Another couple things that I like about it in terms of werewolf movies is that, one, Neil Marshall stays away from the lore and the sort of trappings of werewolves, the cycle of, they're just kind of there. These werewolves just are, and we don't need to get a huge explanation as to why, where this line of werewolves comes from. It doesn't really need to be explained, and I'm a huge fan of not explaining things in monster movies as little as you have to. So they are just this, evil force that is now sort of attacking this group of soldiers at this farmhouse under siege. The other thing that's neat about it is the werewolf design itself. They're kind of unique looking, and they are very tall and slender with bigger heads that are almost like wolf lions or something. And they're ultimately, one of the things that comes out in the commentary is that Neil Marshall talks about how they actually wanted them to have a certain grace in their movement, so they hired dancers, male dancers, to play the werewolves, and they actually put them on stilts, so they're just even taller and that much more foreboding, but still have a grace in their movement. So it really gives a different feel for the werewolves when you see them and when they move than another film. So I like that it distinctifies itself in the look and sort of movement of the werewolves. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, it gets gnarly. It's got a lot of action, gore. It's a fun movie that plays out in a really cool way. So it's a really nice debut film, and it's nice to see it looking so good here. There's lots of commentary tracks. We get a 5.1 DS track. We get a 2.0 track. We get the Neil Marshall commentary, which was on the original Scream Factory disc, which is him talking about inspirations and production stuff. He seems a little disorganized at the beginning, like looking at Wikipedia and IMDb Pro while he's doing the commentary to make some comments on some things that are there. But I think he hits his groove at the halfway point, maybe a little before, and starts to really recall specific scenes and the issues they may or may not have had during those scenes. But again, the whole time he's always pointing out little nods to other movies. You know, this them cocking their guns in unison here is a nod to the Wild Bunch. And so there's lots of fun Easter eggs in that sense, and I dug that about it. Then there's a commentary with producer David E. Allen and Brian O'Toole, which obviously touches more on the production side of things. Differences between the finished film and the script originally, how that went, problematic things during the shoot. It's nuts and bolts and I think interesting from a filmmaking point of view. And then there's a new commentary track with writer and associate film professor Allison Pierce, I think her name is, talking about themes, you know, from an academic standpoint. You know, male fear, male suffering. She talks about the script, how sharp it is, and how it sets the stage for things that'll happen later in the movie with subtlety, and really ties a lot of things together. And it's a really nice, you know, educational track in that sense. She also talks about older films that preceded this one that may tie in and have similar themes or ideas. So that's a good addition to this new 4K. And then in terms of the new stuff from, I can't tell if it's listed specifically on the back. Not really. It's kind of broken out a little differently. I'll just go through it. The new stuff from the Second Sight Blu-ray 4K. There is a new interview with Neil Marshall called Werewolves, Crawlers, Cannibals, and More. That's about 38 minutes and 26 seconds. And it goes straight up from his beginnings of him falling in love with movies. In fact, he tells this story about his dad rousting him out of bed to watch Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein when he was a kid, a couple times in a couple different interviews. So that's obviously a really big deal to him. And then he gets into the beginnings of Dog Soldiers, and this is actually almost like a career retrospective. He goes through The Descent, Doomsday, Centurion, Game of Thrones, Hellboy, The Reckoning, you know, all through all that stuff, and talks about his brief thoughts on those films and working on those films and how that was for him. So that's cool. You get a full career retrospective in this interview. The next feature, more academic, sort of historical. It's called History of Lycanthropy with author Gavin Bedelli on werewolf cinema. This is 33 minutes, 21 seconds. An overview of werewolf movies from the original Wolfman on up, with some real-life historical stuff, but tying a lot of it into Dog Soldiers, and again, talking about the film references in Dog Soldiers and how many things make Dog Soldiers a solid example of a werewolf film or one that stands out. So there's a lot. I thought there's definitely, you know, sort of an overview, but there's a lot of very specific Dog Soldiers related stuff in this. So that's the second new thing. And the third new featurette is actually a video essay. It's Werewolves, Folklore, and Cinema, a video essay by Michael J. Coven, I think. 23 minutes, 24 seconds. And he's using folklore to give some historical context and cultural analysis to werewolf movies through the years, whilst footage of Dog Soldiers plays for 23 minutes. So you're getting historical and cultural context and that kind of stuff happening. Again, those are 3 new Second Sight extras. Then we have the Werewolves versus Soldiers, a look at the making of Dog Soldiers, which is about an hour and a minute long. It's like a full-on, mini doc, basically, where they talk to Neil Marshall, the producers, the cinematographer, production designer, special makeup supervisor, the cast. It's very thorough, and it's a good making of. Again, some of the stuff is touched on in other features, but we're hearing from some people we haven't heard from and getting a really nice look at the whole film and what was involved in it. And that's, again, from the original Blu-ray. Then you have A Cottage in the Woods, a look at the production design with production designer Simon Bowles, who is in the making of, but this is very specifically about the production design, the cabin and things like that, or the farmhouse. 13 minutes, 26 seconds. And then you get a short film by Neil Marshall called Combat, which is about 7 minutes, 37 seconds. So you're getting a lot of stuff in this package. Again, it's a case where most of the extra features end up being on the Blu-ray, right? So, I don't ever mind that. I don't ever mind not sacrificing bitrate on a 4K when I can go over to the Blu-ray to watch the special features. So, anyway, a really good looking transfer. Again, the best I've ever seen it look, and a toss up as to whether you'd get the Second Sight version, I guess, if you're in the UK, or the Scream Factory version if you're in the US. But a nice addition of this film for fans of the movie. And I'd love to see The Descent get a 4K, by the way. Anyway, so that's all I got for this episode. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.